We have two of the largest capacity producing facilities for CLT and are about ready to go online with one of the largest glulam facilities in the world. I didn't realize just how open this industry was for a young guy that was smart and passionate. The sawmill industry is a huge industry in North America. It supports a lot of rural economies. So one of the perks that I'm seeing in the industry now of mass timber is like these panels, these materials can last hundreds of years and potentially be deconstructed and reused again.
If you had the microphone, which you have in a second, if you had the microphone to speak to like all the general contractors and you can speak to all of the architects and all the designers and you could tell them this message, what would that message be?
Ooh.
Welcome back to the Wood World podcast, where we explore the heartbeat of the lumber industry. Today, we're honored to have Charles Gale, a strategic business analyst at SmartLam North America with us. From debunking industry myths to revealing the future of sustainable construction. Get ready to dive deep into the world of SmartLam and discover their groundbreaking projects, innovative solutions, and remarkable achievements that are shaping the future of mass timber construction.
Welcome to the Wood World podcast, a look inside the broad industry of forestry, or as we like to put it, everything from seedlings to homes, and in this episode, even mass timber buildings, skyscrapers out of wood, right? So here we're going to learn from we're being joined by Charles Gale with SmartLam today. I'm your host, Vadim Kovalev. Thank you so much for being here with us. Looking forward to this podcast. Charles, could you please introduce yourself? Where are you coming from? Where's home? What's your job? What company you work for?
Gotcha. Thank you, Vadim. Thanks for having me. Yes, my name is Charles Gale, and I'm a strategic business analyst with SmartLam North America. Currently, I'm located in Columbia Falls, Montana, and I live in Whitefish with my wife and two kids. And I've been with SmartLam for quite a while now, and have been helping the business grow in the mass timber landscape, and have been really focused on my expertise on sustainability and how mass timber and the lumber and the supply and our products can contribute to a greener, more sustainable built environment.
For a little bit of context for our audience, actually, I met Charles at a couple of the conferences that we both were at, probably Mass Timber Conference when Mario and I were over there. But one of the key moments I think that I really connected with you, Charles, was we came with the Koval team out to SmartLam's facility, and we were doing a video there. And gosh, I really enjoyed meeting everybody on your team. But I was like, Charles was interesting to me, and I'd love to connect with him and do this podcast. I was able to hear from you kind of like a really interesting, the practicals. I like how you're able to make it practical and tangible from something that's a lot of data. And that's something I guess, as a little bit of context to the invitation to have you come share about on our podcast today.
It's something as a young guy in the industry I've become more and more passionate about is really understanding the whole breadth of the wood product industry. I'm born and raised in Montana. I went to the University of Montana, one of the top premier resource and conservation schools with a very active, forestry department. And at that time, they were, offering a minor in climate change studies. And so I'm like, well, climate change. Well, I'm a young guy. I'm how is the wood product industry involved? How is my old man who worked at a plywood mill, adding that story of sustainability? And I really got very passionate into understanding how the wood product industry and forest activities and now more importantly, how mass timber can help solve some of those bigger issues from a climate change standpoint. And
Totally.
So, in my past work and kind of just being super passionate about all the people in our industry, I've worked with loggers and sawmillers. I've worked with economic analysis and folks at the Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, and have kind of been in little pieces of the industry on a very technical fashion, but then also been able to kind of step back and really focus on SmartLam as a business and what does that mean in the mass timber landscape as this is, really at its infancy in the
Right.
North America, and really, almost as hot as an industry could be. Mass timber is at the forefront of, telling that sustainable story of wood products.
Absolutely. So I guess, look, for our audience, when we say wood world, right? There's a massive, it's a big range. Like I was saying earlier, it goes from seedlings to, people doing the logging, then sawmills, you've got primary, secondary manufacturing, you've got people taking the wood. And I mean, there's so much uses for wood. So for context, I guess we'll just start with where you are today at SmartLam. And so can you tell us, like, what does SmartLam do, kind of high level, and where in the wood world does your company play a role? You started mentioning mass timber, but for those who are kind of at a more global perspective, where in the wood world are you guys fitting in?
Okay. Yeah, good question. So mass timber is product types, primarily driven by cross-laminated timber, which is a long panel-based product that is laid up with 2x6 or 2x8 in perpendicular layers and various plies and in various species and various grades. These are really structurally sound members for floors, walls, roofs, elevators that can help offset, some of these materials like steel or concrete. Then you have GlueLam. That's a fairly well-known product in the industry. It's been kind of commoditized since the early 60s, 70s, and into today. But we're actually looking at GlueLam at a massive scale and customizable between buildings and specific use cases. You have other product types that are out there in the industry called NLT, nail laminated timber. That's just putting 2x6s and nailing them together to make this big long panel. You also have GLT, which is similar to GlueLam, but just a standard layup with just a number 2. And then you also have DLT, which is a dowel laminated timber. So using no adhesives or nails and making that same kind of rigid panel as NLT, GLT. There are several other mass timber products in the marketplace now that are coming online and are getting engineered and getting designed. And so our company, we have 2 of the largest capacity producing facilities for CLT and are about ready to go online with one of the largest GlueLam facilities in the world.
That's exciting.
And so from our standpoint, we're this material supplier that has unprecedented capacity to fulfill the market. But also what we do is we have a very technical sales team. I mean, these guys are engineers with, architectural, minds that can help support projects. And if an architect or a developer wants to learn about mass timber, they go to our technical sales specialist and they can learn about, well, do you like this visual look, or this structural type of grade of panel might work, or they can work through that kind of sales cycle and help coach them and do some design assist. And then we have one of my favorite pieces of what our business does and where the rubber meets the road is our design and engineering department, led by Jim Henjum and his team. They take that concept, that design, that construction design document, and panelize it and turn it into, okay, this panel goes in this piece of this building, and then it's all geometry and precision detailed so that our CNC machines can then cut that to a 1/16 of an inch tolerance. And so our design team then takes that sales package, converts it into production ready documents and a model that you can review and see and look at. And then those production documents go to our plants. And then our plants go, okay, well, this project has this, and this. They build out their recipes, build out the billet panels. So we press these big 10 by 54 foot long billets, and we'll cut them into, let's say, 9.9 or 9.11 width. And then we'll add in, a spline detail or a lap joint, or we'll add in MPP holes that are all pre-designed at the CD stage and that are kind of worked through with our team, with our capabilities. So you get all the way to that point of production. You've had thousands of hours in this building. And then you get, into production, you have panels, and then you have to ship it. So we have a massive part of our team as our logistics team. And those are reorganizing those panels and those SmartLam beams. Each one has a unique identifier. Okay. Each one has a unique place for that particular, product in the building. And then we ship those on the trucks all across the country. I mean, we're doing up to 100 plus trucks a month, sometimes more. I mean, we're shipping them from New York to Texas to the West Coast, the East Coast. And then they get to the job site and they're unloaded. They're all identified. And then the installation team, we work hand in hand with them. And
Charles, one of the things I remember, I remember talking to, I think it was Jim that you mentioned now, but he was explaining to me how, like, if I remember correctly, like, you guys even take consideration how the different panels lay up on the truck, how you like stack them, how you literally put them together so that if they arrive downtown somewhere, they don't have to like unpack the whole load. They can take the top one and put it into place or something. Like, you're taking that much detail.
We have truck loading diagrams that are laser focused by, there's a couple different methods to do it, just in time shipping in tight metro cities.
Yeah.
That truck has a 2-hour window to get unloaded and put onto the building.
That's wild.
Those have to be 1 through 10. Okay, pick one. 1 goes in the corner, 2 goes in next.
Yeah.
And then, you can reverse stack. So if, let's say, a big job site doesn't want to worry about just-in-time shipping, we can ship them 10 trucks. We can ship those panels, have them off-site in a reverse fashion to where then they load them back on the truck. They're in the correct method to
That's so cool.
Install.
But why is that important? Because, like, one of the things when you get to downtown or you get to your job site, like you're saying, like, isn't one of the big kind of selling points of mass timber construction is like how quickly it comes together. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, from an install standpoint, and we've had so many GCs that have never tried mass timber, and then we got the really big ones that are, building departments around mass timber construction. It's speed of build, right? It's waste, like several folks have said they built 4-story buildings and they could put all the waste of the wood into a 5-gallon bucket.
Jeez, that's awesome.
And then I think some of the big savings that you get from this is structurally you can not only build faster and safer, but you can use less labor. So imagine having maybe 5 to 10 different trades on a typical steel or concrete building. All you have to have is a crane operator, a couple people picking, and a couple people loading and setting. And it goes together so fast. So you save on speed of build, you save on waste, you save on your labor, and that all kind of factors in when you're comparing it to traditional materials like steel or concrete.
Very interesting. Wait, before we continue with the existing, and there's so many more follow-up questions that I want to ask about that, but can we take a quick pause right there? I want to ask you, how the heck did you end up in the wood industry? And you mentioned briefly your father, or it was kind of in the family, but I guess my question is, how did you get your start in your career? And you kind of briefly mentioned it. Did you have to get like a degree? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, good. Well, coming from Montana, I was, born and raised in a very nature-based family, right? We would hike, we would ski, we would camp. I was in Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. So, I have that kind of nature focused as the way I live my life. And then my dad worked at a old plywood mill in Bonner, Montana. It used to be one of the largest facilities in the country. I mean, this was a history, melting pot from the old Anaconda Copper Company and the railroad company, that they would use the logs from the resource to build the railroad ties, to build the commerce and the transit. So
Wow.
It's evolved into this big complex, and then certain companies would buy it and hand it off. And actually, my old Scoutmaster was the manager of. At that time, it was owned by Stimson Lumber, and he gave me a tour when I was in fifth grade or fifth grade, when I was in Scouts, and we saw all these handprints on the beam that all the retired, old timbermen and foresters had left their mark. And I think that really kind of was like, whoa, this isn't a viable industry, that's supporting families. I love being out in the woods. How can I make this work? And so I read a book by Mark Linus called High Tide, and that got me really hooked on, okay, the Kyoto Protocol had just come out in 1996. What is climate change? How is it, evolving? And then I read a tidbit of how forestry, and at that point, what was it? Deforestation was a big issue in third world countries. And at the same time, the U.S. was evolving through the environmental wars in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to more of a sustainability managed, concept. And that, most of these businesses were doing it anyways, as replanting and sustainable practices. But I kind of just was like, got to put them all together, and I want to get into this industry. So forestry was kind of that foundational science. Okay, what is silviculture? What are species? I had to learn every tree species in North America. So oak, and
you still remember all of them?
And the Latin genus species, and then that was part of it. Soil types, harvest. Then once you get into that foundational education of forestry, it's a passion of a lot of folks, that it's a slow, long target that every day you're making an impact. I wasn't in it to go make a quick buck. I wasn't in it to go say, oh, I want to, jump into business. Throughout my education and then working at the Bureau of Business and Economic Research on kind of economics, I was like, I want to start creating facts. So I moved to Portland, Oregon with my wife at the time. We chased our careers, and I ended up working for Stimson as a manufacturing intern.
Okay.
Just doing continuous improvement projects. Okay, how do we save more money? How do we do this? And then I got into optimization. Okay, how do we make more lumber out of less logs? Okay, then I actually ran an optimization program for several years. I mean, we installed 6-7 optimizers at all the different spots of a sawmill, and I could manage those from corporate office in Portland as the riots were going on in Portland, And
wow.
And then I evolved into a sales and ops planner and helped manage, their 2x4 8-foot program throughout their 26 DCs for Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, and got the mass timber bug when I met, and I've had some very good mentors that I can lean on, like Craig Rawlings and Rich Lane and Todd Morgan. Like, just I found a lot of folks I didn't realize just how open this industry was for a young guy that was smart and passionate. And again, I'm not that smart, but I put myself in positions where I could learn quickly and help provide value, pretty quickly. And so I met Craig, and he was starting his, Mass Timber Conference, and I said, man, I got to go. This was 2016, 17. And then I heard SmartLam. Whoa, what's SmartLam doing? Right? They're in my backyard. They're in Montana. They're making laminated timber. Whoa, something's going on here. So I met with Craig, and we he was working on the conference, and it was gaining a ton of traction. And we actually sat down, and one of the big things that I'm proud about is this North American Mass Timber Industry Report. We were sitting down, had dinner and a beer, and I'm a young guy. I was 29, 30. I said, what is this mass timber in North America? Like, can we quantify, everything in every supply chain to the final product, and then help grow that message? Because there's Think Wood was just getting online. FP Innovations was maybe 5 years ahead. And there was all these architects, developers trying to work within this space. And for me, I was trying to learn as much about it. So we published this report, put it in, and then from there, it's, I left Stimson, started consulting, and went and worked for SmartLam as a consultant for 2.5 years. And
really incredible.
I look back, it's been fantastic.
That's super incredible. Thanks for sharing, just briefly, even like the synopsis of you went to school, studied it, and then applied yourself. And so I guess you saw the wood world, as we call it, from multiple angles, from multiple facets. And so Stimson, or early in your career in sawmilling, that's like primary, right, production, and then now you're what you would call more secondary manufacturing?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So I guess we could kind of get in. Okay, so SmartLam as a mass timber, we are, consuming 2x6 or 2x8, lumber.
Mm.
We're then finger joining that into the long lamellas to make our panels and our glulam products.
See, for you, hold up. See, you are like in the weeds on this every single day. So it's like, yeah, of course we do this and we do that, and we're going to put it together. And I've been to a couple of to your plant, so I've seen the layups and things like that. Yeah. But somebody who's completely doesn't know, or first time hearing or heard mass timber but wants to learn more, quickly kind of walk me through. I mean, you kind of mentioned it now, but you're kind of breezing through here. Let's do a due diligence.
Let me work my way back up. So we consume lumber, right? And where does that lumber come from? Okay, that comes from, sawmills. Sawmills make lumber. Now, how much lumber do they make? Right? That's the sawmill industry is a huge industry in North America. Supports a lot of rural economies, and actually produces somewhere in the north of 60 billion board feet.
Okay, that seems like a big number, Charles. Again, somebody who doesn't know, what does that actually mean? Like, can
60 billion board feet to build all of the houses, all of the mixed, residential, multifamily, all of the stick frame, that the U.S. has traditionally used to build. Also, used for scaffolding and for specialty products, for cabinetry, all of that sawmilling industry is huge. 62 billion board feet. So out of that 62 billion board feet, I think it's 48 billions consumed in the U.S. Some gets exported, some gets imported. And then, out of that mix, how much do we really consume? It's like 0.002% into mass timber products.
Okay.
So when you look at our scale and impact, and something that I think, really has to get communicated, is we are a small consumer, secondary producer of wood products. However, our impact and where the market's going, we'll eventually start absorbing more and more of that lumber market. And so within that sawmilling market, you got your big boys, right? You got the top 10. You got the West Frasers, the Innofors, the Weyerhaeusers, the GPs, the Canfors, the Hamptons, the Stimsons, the IFGs. And then you got all of these mom and pop shop players. You got a Northwest industry that's different than the South. You have a growing industry in the Northeast, and a very small industry in kind of this, let's say, less below, like Colorado on down to Texas. And so what I've tried to focus on in SmartLam is, okay, how can we help and find the smaller lumber supplier, the sawmills, to help feed our mills. And so we are very fortunate that SmartLam, most of our investors, almost all of them, are sawmillers in the South. And so we're vertically integrated, working with them on lumber grades, lumber quality, and they can supply that material to our Dothan facility on grade, this, that, and the other. And it becomes, 60 miles away, I can order all the lumber we need to make our products. So it becomes local, right? And then in the Northwest, I'm partnering with various sawmills to do the same thing we're doing in the South to supply our mills. I mean, one of my favorite sawmills is right next door. So next time you come up, we'll call up Stoltz Land and Lumber, and we'll go tour the forest, because they're literally 10 minutes away, and they make some beautiful wood.
Charles, in fact, I have been to Stoltz, and I ended up going to the forest with one of the foresters, Matt, and we shot an episode of the podcast in the forest. It was super cool.
Yeah, and they have that. It's unique, right? So you got those big players that are doing, they own swaths of land and have become REITs, and they're doing sustainable management on a large scale. And then you got places like Stoltz or other family owns that have small tracts, but that also harvest off of Forest Service and state lands and tribal lands, and because each sawmiller has its unique fiber supply, or wood box as they call it. Stoltz being very local, unique. 100 years they've been managing their lands and feeding their mills and making really good lumber. And there's also, I like to call it regionality between the forest landscape, where a Doug fir on the coast might be different than an Intermountain, Idaho, Montana Doug fir, large. You have Southern Yellow Pine, where you have, this plantation-based kind of monoculture, but sustainably managed. And then if you go up north into North Carolina, South Carolina, you got the denser, more forest managed landscapes where they pull logs off, and it's not a plantation based forestry.
Okay.
So within that, you have, about all the forest land, what is actually timberland, right? That can be managed and be harvested. And then within that, what is certified for forest certification, which meets legal or responsible. And then within that, you kind of go in and see where the mill's wood baskets are and what types of grades they can make and quality that sawmill has. That is all into the equation of why we have a plant in Dothan and why Columbia Falls has been a very good, strategic location for us.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, does it seem very strategic, not just like random. When you were talking about certifications, and before that, even lumber grades and species, I guess, what are the common species used in mass timber? And can you maybe it's a stupid question, but can you mix and match them in a building, or does that even happen? I mean, I'm sure you probably want to have consistency in the layers of a particular panel, but can you mix and match, or?
Yeah. So we adhere to the PRG 320.
Sounds technical.
So so just like any, wood product, there are third-party certifications.
Okay.
Right? And then those third-party certifications, based on rigorous, quality control manuals and rigorous testing and certification, ensure that your facility adheres to their standards.
Okay.
And so we stamp those. And then based on 320, it outlines the guidelines of how to make a CLT panel, and what species and lumber grades you can put into it.
Okay.
So to get back to your question, the most common panel type in the Northwest is different than the panel type being used in the Southeast based on the wood basket. So in the Northwest, we're, focusing, and the industry's based on kind of this V2M5, which is a SPF panel, number 2 and number 3. So number 2 in the longs, number 3 in the core boards, up to 3 to 9 plies. You can also put on a Doug fir face. So a lot of architects and developers want their CLT to match the Doug fir glulam. So you can do a V2 M5 with a Doug fir face, and it's structurally sound and aesthetically pleasing and matches the building and the architect's needs.
See, that's another point where like it just makes sense to you, but because I'm not in it, and a lot of the listeners are probably not in it on a daily. Yeah. So I didn't even know that that's possible. So you're basically using a different species on the inside. Is that right? And then
Correct.
Doug fir on the outside as like just for aesthetics, you said.
Aesthetics, yep. And that's also adheres to the strength properties of that subgrade. So you have visually graded lumber, right? That's a number 2, a select struck. That is, in the Beautiful. Sawmill, scanned and optimized visually.
Yeah.
So that's one component of a product offering. Then you also have E-rated lumber. Have you heard of MSR lumber?
I think I heard it when I was at your shop, but can you explain it?
Yeah. So E-rated lumber is, coined as MSR, machine stress rated lumber.
Okay.
Every board hits a ping, and it gives, if it doesn't hit that strength profile, then it gets kicked out and then can be visually graded. And so that provides a higher strength value than a V-rated panel. And so we also have, our E21M1 and our E4M5 down in Dothan, where we use 2400 or 2100 in the longs and can put a number 3 embedder in the cores.
Okay.
And so we can mix and match various grades of lumber depending on what's required for the structural capability of the building. And again, this is, there's a whole science and engineering background on
totally,
wood strength properties that has been, third-party verified through PRG, that, I'm just the guy who's there to help source those. So usually we get a project that has already been designed, they've modeled it, they've stress tested it, they've engineered it, they know it's going to work. So then we go, hey, this panel works perfect for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or this option works good for you. Or, hey, you want a little more architectural, face? Try this.
Sure.
And so in the South, we're primarily Southern Yellow Pine focused with a V3 and an E-rated panel. We have done some major legwork for R&D and the industry down there. We've certified a yellow poplar panel, and we've certified a local eastern hemlock, which is coming from Maine and Virginia area. In the past, we've actually pressed up hardwoods, oaks, wow, and mahoganies and in a 2x6, and we've done special projects on those. And now, as long as that wood adheres and bonds and is structurally sound, we're good. So there's a lot of components of the wood product industry where it's focused on softwoods. We've done testing on hardwoods.
That was going to be my follow-up question, Charles. The hardwoods is like more of an R&D, like you guys experimented with that, or is that like a production-ready product?
Currently, right now, no, it's not available in PRG. However, I think some folks are working on including hardwoods into the PRG 320.
Why would you want to do a hardwood panel?
Well, there's some amazing ideas out there with an oak face, so that it provides that aesthetics. Poplar, is somewhat of a low value, but a higher strength grade, in the South. Eastern hemlock, which is a softwood species, was more for the local story of the Northeast, where their industry is looking for a value-added commercial mass timber product to start building buildings out of their local supply. So we worked with, we've built 2 or 3 products out of Eastern Hemlock. But as far as those to the big market, those are hard to sell at a competitive price and are slowly to mature. I think, sometime
Makes sense.
10 years, we might be getting hardwoods.
So one question then back to like your main product. So like once the panel is completed and done, ready to go to site, can you walk me through a little bit about mass timber? Like, yes, it's really an industry that's, I think, flourishing and really, like you said, picking up speed and picking up momentum in North America. As far as I understand, in Europe, it was already kind of been done for a while, mass timber. I guess, can you share more about the differences between mass timber construction and the more traditional construction types? We touched on it a little bit, but really when the panels are ready to go and you ship them, like walk me through why mass timber versus traditional construction.
Yeah, no, good question. Our current land, as you mentioned, Europe has been doing this for, since the 90s and have scaled up, and a lot of their production is, has been accepted by, the whole building industry in Europe as a means to offset, the traditional light frame or steel or concrete buildings, as a means to be more sustainable and sequester carbon. And so in the US, we have all of these building codes. And again, I'm not an expert, but what I've understood is we have, kind of the IBCC codes that then trickle into your local codes and then even trickle into your city and building codes. And what mass timber is not trying to come in and say, hey, look, this is what everybody has to do. What we've been coming into is saying, look, we can do this faster and sometimes in a full building cheaper most of the times. And it has a structural and an aesthetic component that is easy. You take it and you drop it in and you plug and play. So where we're starting to compete and be very aggressive on, not only, from the architect, the developer, the owner standpoint, is how do they achieve the LEED building, net zero or platinum? Well, by using wood in its inherent, carbon impact and carbon negative, from an LCA standpoint, they can get those points to achieve that building certification just by the use of our EPDs and LCAs. And majority of what we're trying to do is get into those landscapes that are in the big cities that are going to be offsetting steel or concrete emissions. And there's been so many studies that show, steel or concrete, 4-story building versus mass timber, the impact is huge. And with that steel and concrete, you got extra labor, you got extra waste, you got a whole industry that we've just slowly been able to absorb and fill through our mass timber projects.
Hold up. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
Now, what you touched on was the green building certifications with LEED, and you mentioned platinum. Is that right? Or could you expand on, you were just talking about?
So, yeah, there's, the Green Building Council, the USGBC has, their LEED building certification. It takes kind of this whole building life cycle analysis into context. Okay, what materials you're using, what verifications and certifications do you have to ensure those products are legal and responsible, right? And chain of custody. And then you got declare, you got your kind of material ingredients, your declare label, like making sure you're not putting VOCs in a building where, children will be there, right? And then
what's a VOC?
The volatile compounds, organic compounds. So they take into this kind of segmented approach on all of the materials used in the building and model it from, at time from basically cradle to grave. Getting into, okay, well, what happens when this building becomes, obsolete and we need to demolish it,
right?
or we need to reuse it. So one of the perks that I'm seeing in the industry now of mass timber is like these panels, these materials can last hundreds of years and potentially be deconstructed and reused again.
Dang.
I mean, there was a buddy of mine at Oregon State University who was reclaiming wood from 100-year-old houses in Portland, because Portland passed a law that any house over 100 years old has to be deconstructed. So he was salvaging the lumber that was cut probably, in the 1920s, 30s,
Wow.
taking that lumber, planing it, and making cross-laminated timber.
Seriously.
Which is completely reusing wood products over and over again. And so that combined with kind of our, like the high level, macro level that I tell everybody about forestry and wood products, is that we are sequestering more carbon into our wood products year over year at the forest landscape, meaning that we're growing more carbon than we are emitting every year. It's called the growth to harvest ratio. And in the Northwest, it's about a 1.2, so about 20% more carbon. And in the Southeast, it's almost 80%.
That's a really interesting stat. Well, can you explain more than what are you comparing there? You're comparing, to just dumb it down, you're comparing how much carbon you're growing, comparing it to carbon emitted from just the industry, or as a whole?
As a whole, well, on the forestry landscape, it's called the growth to drain ratio. So how much carbon is grown each year versus what is removed through harvest and or dying through disease and mortality.
Yes.
Fire being included in that.
Yes. And
so at the end of the day, that number, and this has been, the research is coming out like wildfire now and has been calculated since the 40s. These are scientists with PhDs that are silviculturists that monitor carbon balances in forest ecosystems. They take that kind of net number, that growth to drain, and say, look, this industry, this forest, in all of its, as a macro level in each region, has a growth to drain ratio of X. And in the Northwest, it's about 1.2. And in the Southeast, it's about 1.8.
1.8?
So about 80% more growth. And if it gets to 1, you're at sustainability on a harvest landscape.
Whoa.
So, yeah. And to answer your question about, the emissions of our products and how that carbon balance flows through, there's a term called an EPD, which is an environmental product declaration. And this is a full life cycle analysis of what it takes to harvest those trees, what it takes from an energy perspective and carbon standpoint, what it takes to saw those logs into lumber, what it takes to take that lumber and put it into mass timber products, and then what it takes to going into the whole building life LCA, what it takes to transport that product to site, and all of the building construction ratio or LCAs. And then at the end, you're going to reuse or recycle.
That's a full life cycle. That's incredible.
So that to me is where this industry is heading, and where SmartLam's become a major player in helping tell that story, where we have a local supply of wood. It's, a forest. We have local supply of sawmills, sequestering carbon. We can tell that story, major industry, wins have been seedlings to solutions, part of the Jamestown group, and a project we did with a bunch of folks and in industry, where we were able to find a vendor, and this was all promoted by the developer, mind you. They're so in tune with this that they're driving this message, and we're helping them get there. They wanted Georgia-based lumber for a Georgia-based building.
Love it.
How do we do that and tell the story? And the Georgia Forestry Association has done a wonderful job, along with Jamestown, to communicate that. And then at the end of the day, it's all backed by that LCA. So it's complete traceability and really transparency with their building, so that their clients, which a lot of these big tech companies are coming in that have, very environmentally conscious, workforce, they want to know, where did this wood come from? It's not being, it's not being coming from illegal sources. It's sustainable. It's beautiful. We love working here, but I want to make sure that it's, a part of my environmental conscious. And so, I think we're continuing to start to see a lot more big tech companies, focus their buildings on, and just developers in general, focus their method to, wow, wood is not only structurally sound in mass timber, but it's aesthetically pleasing. They call that the biophilia effect. Oregon, Washington, growing huge. I mean, they have, mass timber coalitions in both the states. They have, have you guys seen the work done by Timber Lab and ZGF Architects on the Portland airport?
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's incredible work. We're working with them on several of those same types of stories and projects, but this is what we do every day. We just don't communicate it, right? Wow. And I think our industry, I know the sawmillers and the foresters are sitting there doing their daily, cruising and harvests, and they're like, yes, I am I'm a steward of the land. I love, I'm so passionate about forestry, right? And then the sawmills are like, well, let's just make as much money as we can. But they don't, the industry has been somewhat poor at telling the story.
100%.
And then, in my opinion, like, really SmartLam and mass timber is the catalyst to working with these architects and developers with this mindset that sustainability in building landscapes across North America is at the forefront, and wood is the best material to use. Do the full loop and bring the whole, wood world into the forefront, where you and I probably have friends that are like, what do you do eating in wood products? Isn't it bad?
Exactly.
You can look at them and say, no. Number one, IPCC recommends that forestry and active management become a critical component, and that would be used in more buildings.
Charles, so what is one of the most misunderstood aspects of our industry, of the wood world then? Because people that are outside of the daily workforce participating in the wood world, what are the common misconceptions, and can you speak to those?
That's a tough one. I think some things that we've seen are, forest certification types, FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, versus SFI, which is Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Those forest certification standards that are usually written into, the building spec, sometimes are, an architect might want FSC, but the wood might not be available at the price that they want to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And in the South, there's only several suppliers that have FSC, softwood in that lumber that we can actually use to make into CLT.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, we've been the first manufacturer to not only do SFI COC and FSC COC in the U.S. out of our Columbia Falls, but we're the first, and we got a project in Miami that's the first Southern Yellow Pine FSC sourced, building that meets that living building challenge. So different green building certifications have different certification requirements, and that's been a tough, I guess, misconception that that we're just constantly educating. And hey, if you're really considering about price, how about SFI COC? SFI is more globally accepted in the U.S. for its certification. So in the Northwest, almost 98% of the mills are SFI certified. In the South, we've been working with all of our investor mills to be SFI certified, but they haven't really gotten that pressure to become forest certified, even though that they do this every day, right? They still have to adhere to the state and federal, local, harvesting guidelines. And so that's one. Then I think the cost is an interesting one that I think when you're competing with, the building construction landscape, and this is, kind of my interpretation as a forester, not a building material science guy. Everybody wants to go with the cheapest, quickest option. And our product is, just a tiny bit more expensive than traditional materials. But when you look at the total build of a mass timber building versus steel or concrete or light frame or a multi-story, 2-floor concrete with mass timber on top, and you look at those, the labor savings of your structural build or the time savings that you can, lease out your building sooner so you're not paying more in interest. When you look at that, it ends up being about 4 to 10% cheaper than traditional materials. But it's hard to push everybody to say, well, you're going to pay a little bit more in mass timber, but at the end of it, you'll realize those cost savings.
Charles, I'd love to know what projects, and you started, you mentioned the one in Georgia. What projects are like that one that you're super proud of that SmartLam's worked on or underway or has completed?
Yeah.
And are they one of those, like we hear about, SmartLam, or not SmartLam, but that mass timber buildings are going to be taller and taller as standards evolve. Mm-hmm. And like in Europe or places in the world, like, what is it, 18-story buildings are being completed? Like, that sounds crazy. Like, there are like massive skyscrapers going to be out of wood?
Yeah. And there's, a project going in California that's big, Brock Commons was the first in North America, right? Yeah, I think the tall timber is here to stay. Now, is it going as quickly as possible? Is it being absorbed, compared to steel or concrete or traditional methods? No. Like, we have so much underutilized capacity as an industry, and especially with, some of the major manufacturers having some struggles over the last couple of years. It's nowhere near where we need to be if we want to keep championing, our sustainability message. We got to be, focused on architects, developers to use this as the base material. And so some states like California and New York, they're starting to adopt those as wood first, concrete, steel second, because of that sustainability aspect. But from a capacity standpoint, sky's the limit. I mean, and from a project standpoint, we've built 7-story project in Frisco, Texas called South Stone Yards. It was gorgeous.
South Stone Yards?
Yes. We are. It should be coming online here very soon. That one was great. The whole southern market, we've built probably 95% of those projects in our Dothan facility over the last years. I'm so proud of all of those projects because those are GCs that traditionally haven't used material, or those are developers or owners that are taking a leap of faith using this new CLT mass timber. They're so used, but also, hybrid structures are really important to me. So we did a project in Atlanta, which is actually bigger than the one that we did in Atlanta, the Jamestown Ponce City project. And this one was called Echo Street West. It was 300,000 square feet of building, 106 truckloads of CLT, delivered from Alabama to Georgia. It built really quickly, and it's just gorgeous looking building.
What's that one called again? Echo Street West, you said?
Echo Street West.
Yeah. How tall is it?
It's 4 stories.
Okay.
And then there's, an event space, and they're trying to do this really hip, livable community there. And
that's in Atlanta?
That's in Atlanta. Yep.
I'd love to check it out when I'm there next time. I want to go there next month.
I can make the intro to you for you. But in the Northwest, you're starting to see these architects already design for mass timber. So it's great because you don't have to convert. Yes, we still want to convert, you know. I think for SmartLam, we're, getting into the warehousing, we're getting into offices, we're getting into, possibly, smaller multifamily and and um, eventually possibly get into residential. Now, residential hasn't worked in the U.S. because it's so cheap to build out a stick frame.
Yeah.
And if somebody can crack that egg and do what the Euros are doing with these custom house CLT, where they take 4 or 5 panel types and make it however they want, not completely modularized, but pretty close.
Right.
And I think we could start to see it. Anybody on this that's listening, there's a really good tool called that ThinkWood Woodworks has developed called the Win Network. And that has every project in the U.S. and I believe Canada, or maybe just the U.S., and has pictures, who the architect was, who the developer was, who was the material supplier, who was the installer.
Yeah.
And they've really cataloged this movement by a project base, because that's where everybody wants to look at what are you guys doing? Well, we build beautiful looking buildings out of wood.
I'll find that website and put in a link when we post this podcast. Charles, I guess we covered a lot of topics, and we covered kind of a large range of ideas and stories. And thank you for sharing those. What I'm hearing, I talked with other folks in mass timber space, and what I'm hearing is maybe there's an opportunity for more education, if you will, in North America for mass timber in general. And if you had the microphone, which you have in a second, if you had the microphone to speak to like all the general contractors, and you can speak to all of the architects and all the designers, and you could tell them this message, what would that message be?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm equipped to promote that, but from what I've learned in my short time, and specifically with SmartLam, is, target wood and mass timber in any building type that you're trying to use. Work with us to help you get to that point that you feel confident that this new material is becoming the standard. And then work with us if you need, how to navigate the codes or the green building certifications. Work with us every step of the way as a partner to help you get that beautiful structure that you want without having to use traditional materials. And we need to do this quickly. We have to grow mass timber industry even faster than it's growing right now. That's my main message, is in every every building that's using steel or concrete, there should be a mass timber option. The span should be calculated. You work with the supplier, you work with us to get to that point, because that building will go up faster with less labor and be a better looking building for your tenants, and potentially save save them big money. But it's to me, my message is we're just at the tipping point of the use of mass timber and its adoptance in the U.S., and we need to scale up huge over the next 5 years to have a big impact into our climate change, obligations. I mean, I'm doing this for my kids. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old. And when I bring them out to the boneyard or bring them out to show them the plant, they're like, "Daddy, this is so cool. This is great." And when I tell them, I'm like, "Look, what I'm doing is to give you a more sustainable building, to give you a more sustainable environment. But we need to do it quickly. And we need to get everybody at the government level, everybody at the permitting, everybody at the developer, the architect, to buy into it. We're doing it. I mean, we've done it. We've done it over the years. We've survived the COVID. We've survived the lumber price. SmartLam is here to play as the major mass timber supplier in North America, from sale to install. We can do it all, and it needs to be done now. Is my main message. If that's a little bit of a passionate answer.
Absolutely, Charles. Well, and the cool thing is that here at Koval, like, we see that opportunity as well. And our mission, the mission of the company, is to improve the lives of the people in the wood industry globally. And we're very much passionate about that. I personally love the people of this industry, yourself and your suppliers, the users. That's what I'm calling the wood world. And we're really on fire to get out there and tell this story. I mean, it's been a story that around the world. I mean, as I traveled to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, everywhere, North America, Europe, you just, these, for whatever reason, this industry has been kind of like looked poorly upon, and like, oh, you guys are cutting down trees. Or, I mean, when we talk about Stoltz, like, I literally went up to the forest with the forester, and I was like, okay, dude. So the misconception is when loggers or the crew comes up to log, they'll just like pick a direction and clear cut in that direction for the day, and then they'll come up the next day and just clear cut in the other. And he's like, no.
It's not Fern Gully.
So that's the message we want to share and promote. And we love this industry, love the people, and for the same reasons, like, it's super sustainable. It's just a long cycle. It's here to stay. We love the industry, want to support it, and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation today, Charles.